Hello, and welcome to the first episode of my travel series, The Ways of the World. I'm your host, Ava Petrosky. In each episode, we will focus on a different country and culture, discovering the various ways of the world through the lenses of Villanova students and faculty. These Villanovans have studied abroad and are here to share their experiences. For my first episode today, I have a very special guest. She is a junior studying English and Irish Studies at Villanova University and is here with me to discuss her recent study abroad endeavors in Ireland this past summer. Let me introduce you to Caitlin Gibson.
Hi, Ava.
Thank you so much for coming here today, Caitlin. So please tell me, how was Ireland?
Well, it was just wonderful. It was the best 8 weeks of my life. I was there from May to July this summer, and it was just wonderful.
Amazing. What did you do during your time abroad in the program?
I was living and working in Dublin. I had an internship at the University College Dublin School of English, Film and Drama, and my research was just in Victorian short stories that would be produced for a podcast through the Museum of Literature Ireland. So I was working with really great, really smart people in the literary world, and then also in the computer science world, navigating a software called Curator, which roamed thousands of British Library database texts to pull out text based on keywords and themes that you just put in and came up in seconds. I learned a lot of the values of research and working with others in a way that you probably wouldn't expect in an independent research kind of job like this. I relied a lot on my boss to help navigate because what I was looking for was so niche, right? And the texts were so nuanced. It took a lot of discussion with other really smart people and really generous people with their kindness and their intellect to determine what was the best decision to go forward in the research, what was meant to stay on the project, what wasn't. And then also just figuring out the nitty-gritty of research as it is was really invaluable to my career, especially as I'd like to go into higher education and continue research like this and continue thinking and writing about research and the things I find as I go along.
What was your favorite work that you researched?
Well, the story I ended up going with, the name is blanking on me, but it was written by a woman named E. Owens Blackburn. And she was a writer in the Victorian period who was a woman, but because it was the Victorian period, as was typical for women like Charlotte Bronte, George Eliot, she took on a pen name because she wouldn't get published otherwise. So I got to learn a little bit about what it was like to be a woman author and to pursue this kind of authorship in that time, and then also to see what kind of work she was writing about. And so it was mostly Gothic work that I was focusing on, and her story was about a haunting and an English manor of an Anglican family that moves in Dublin. So then there's also thinking about some of the post-colonial ramifications of Irish life and thinking about, well, what does it mean that an Anglican family moves in and they're haunted? What does it mean that they're moving into Dublin at this time where people are starving and dying? Understanding the societal effects of literature and how literature is reflecting the society it's written in. Mm-hmm. So it was very interesting.
That's awesome. So what was the duration of your program?
I was there for 8 weeks. Mm-hmm. From I think the day I moved in was May 27th and I left July 22nd.
What were your living arrangements?
I lived on campus at UCD.
What
student housing? Oh, University College Dublin.
Okay, I understand. And did you have roommates?
I did. I had one roommate from Villanova and then 2 roommates from Colorado State. So I got to meet a lot of different people, even though I had a cohort of 15 Villanova students.
Awesome. So why did you decide to study abroad?
I always knew that I would be abroad. I always knew that when I came to Villanova, I knew Irish Studies was somewhere in my timeline. It was somewhere in my study. And I also knew going abroad would be in there because I had grown up hearing stories of my dad study abroad and wonderful trips to Ireland that my family had taken. And I was like, I got to make some memories of my own. So I wanted to pursue that and make my own memories in Ireland. And I definitely did.
Aw. Had you traveled to Ireland before?
I'd gone for a summer before my freshman year at Villanova. It was just for a week or two. It was nothing crazy. And I fell in love. I went to Dublin and I went to Galway. It was just a wonderful, wonderful time.
So on this trip, did you do any side travel outside of Dublin?
Well, the lovely thing about Dublin is it's so big. So you can go all over the county and there's just different places and things to visit. So I was in the city centre a lot, but I also went, still in Dublin County, a little closer to Wicklow, to a town called Dalkey for their book festival. And it was just lovely. It's a coastal town. And you can kind of do a cliff walk and just see the coast, see the old Mortobello towers where, I might be mispronouncing that, but where the British Army would shoot cannons at traveling ships that maybe weren't the right ships that should be coming to Irish land. So it was a beautiful little town, and it's all one street. So you could walk the town probably 15 times in 15 minutes. It was a lovely place to be. But we also went to Waterford with my parents. I went to County Mayo a couple times. And I went to Wexford I went to visit a farm, like an artist retreat, and it was lovely.
So what's your favorite place out of all of those mentions?
Oh, Westport. It's in County Mayo. It's a coastal town. I'm going to keep saying coastal town because it's an island. It's a coastal town. And it's got such a rich history. There's a famous pirate queen, Grace O'Malley, lived there. And she's just a wonderfully awesome historical feminist figure. She fought with Queen Elizabeth for rights to her own land, for rights to her own land. And there's just a great rich history, but it's also just a vibrant little community. It's a small town with a small town feel, but it's almost like you're in a holiday movie, like a Hallmark movie. It's a wonderful little place to be, and my friends and I had a wonderful time.
Awesome. And you said that your parents visited you, so when did your family come?
My grandmother came first, actually, with her sister, during the middle of my time there. So just about 4 weeks in, they came in. I think it was like the end of June, the beginning of July. And they came to Dublin. We also went to visit Ashford Castle in County Mayo, it's right by the city of Cong. Well, I shouldn't say city, the town, the village of Cong, where The Quiet Man was filmed. It's a very famous Irish-American romanticized image of Irish life, film with John Wayne. I think it was directed by John Ford. But anyways, I grew up with it. It doesn't matter who was in it. I just grew up with it. And it's very famous. It's very, very dramatic and very stereotyped, but it's a cute film. It was filmed in that town right next to the castle. And the castle used to be owned by the Guinness family. So it's a very historical place. It was also like the home of many celebrity weddings. I think Pierce Brosnan was married there, which is kind of nice. So it was a whole big thing, but it was just a lovely little getaway from work and school. It was great. Awesome. And then my parents came towards the end of the trip. So,
do you have family in Ireland?
I do. I have family outside of Dublin, in a few towns. One of them lives just about 10 miles outside of Dublin, so she would come in on the Lewis, which is like not really a speed rail, but it's like a trolley that goes through Dublin city centre. So she'd come in on the Lewis, and we'd get lunch every once in a while. And then I have family up in Donegal that are living around there. So we're a bit spread out, but we're all there.
Was that your first time meeting them, or had you known them before?
I'd met them briefly when I'd visited Dublin many, many years ago. But that was the first time really getting to know them, which is lovely because they've only been to America once, and it was before I was born. So they'd ask me questions about my family, about people who have never been have never been alive when I've been alive, and I'd be like, oh yes, I've heard great things about them, but I can't tell you anything else.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. So what did you do in your free time?
I did a lot of reading. Outside of just doing the reading of what I was doing, I was trying to really immerse myself in Dublin culture, and Dublin has a rich literary history. So I was trying to kind of just immerse myself in the world that James Joyce, Oscar Wilde, all those people walked through. So my ambition was to read all of Dubliners, which is a short story. It's just a compilation of short stories by James Joyce. It was my ambition to read all of it. I didn't read all of it, but I would go to little scenic bits in Dublin and different towns and just sit and read and enjoy the fact that I was out in the beautiful nature. The summer was chilly, but it's warm in the sun in Dublin. So I would sit in the sun and read as many books as I could. I also just enjoyed hanging out with my friends. We would go to get ice cream after work and go shopping. My roommate and I tried to find a place to get a pedicure for weeks on end. We'd never found one. Pedicures are incredibly expensive in Dublin. Especially, it was it was extortion, really. It was 35 euros to get a pedicure, and it was like, I will just wait until I get home and just suffer in silence until then.
That's so funny. Did you attend any local, maybe concerts or events while you were there?
Yeah. So one of the great things about our program was that we got to go to a lot of really great arts programs because we wanted to just see the culture of Dublin. So our class focused on poetry. So our professor would send us tips about poetry sessions happening in and around Dublin. And we went to one place. It was called it was on top of a bar. And in this little bar, all these people who were amateur poets, amateur writers would get together and share their work. They were called Sunflower Sessions. And it would be the last Thursday of every month. They'd get together, go down, grab a pint, because there was a bar right underneath, grab a pint, come up, and read their poetry, and then just discuss it together. And it was just a beautiful thing. It was such an alive community, and it was so vibrant. There were people of all different ages and backgrounds. There was a man who worked in finance who wrote about his trip from home to work and just walked people through the train ride that it took from Limerick to Dublin and what that was like.
Wow.
So it was beautiful just to see first the art scene in Dublin, but then also to see how art affects different people of different backgrounds and different statures. And it was wonderful to see how alive poetry and art was, even amongst people who are very elderly and maybe retired.
What did you find your greatest challenge of trying to assimilate in 8 weeks to this Irish culture?
Well, my accent didn't help. It gave me away a few times, but I don't even know if I would call it a challenge, but something that was at least felt like an impetus to kind of really meaningful conversations or just honest conversations with Irish people was kind of the politics of America. They're all incredibly aware of American politics and will give you their opinion straight away. I'd rather talk to them about what their life is like and what Irish culture is like, especially because we were there during an election, like during EU elections. I would have loved to talk to more Irish people about their elections, but they are so concerned about ours that they won't stop talking to us about it. So I'd wished that maybe the polarization of our culture hadn't transferred over to theirs as much. But everyone was still incredibly lovely and so kind. And it came from curiosity. It came from genuine, kind curiosity. But still, it's like you just want to know the people you are and you're with, and not talk so much about your own experience.
Yeah, yeah. Did you find it challenging to be away for the whole 8-week period? Did you ever feel homesick?
No, I actually never did, and I fully anticipated feeling homesick. I think part of the reason I didn't feel as homesick was A, because I was busy. I was a good amount of busy. And then B, I also found ways to stay in touch with people back home that maybe weren't just calls or texts. My dad, before I left, he showed me some things from when he went away. And there was this little notebook. It was just like a very small college-ruled notebook, maybe like this big, that he wrote his notes in when he went to Galway, when he was at Villanova, when he studied abroad. And I took it with me, and I flipped through, and there was just 2 pages about how he was going up to Donegal, where our family was, and he was going to try and find our roots. And it inspired me for the entire time that I was there to write everything down that had happened each day to my dad as a letter. So every night I'd write, "Dear Dad, I went to this place today, I did this." And part of it was reminding me of what I was doing, but it was also so I could share that story with other people and stay connected to people in a way that calls, texts, emails couldn't really do.
That's beautiful. Did you give him the letters?
I did. I don't think he read them all. I think he started them and he was like, "Oh, this is so kind." And he's like, "All right, that's enough, Caitlin." I can't blame him. It's 8 weeks of nonsense.
So he studied abroad through Villanova, but a different program.
Yes.
Okay.
The program is still offered, and it's fantastic if people want to go.
Is there a reason why you did the Dublin program instead of he went to Galway?
Yeah.
The Galway program?
So I actually had planned on going to Galway. But then I saw the Dublin program, and there were just some really wonderful people advocating for it. And also, the opportunity to do an internship abroad is so rare. You never get that kind of opportunity. And I'm so glad I took it, because the internship I got I would never get elsewhere, and I'm not gonna find here, realistically. So I was drawn to the internship aspect. I was also drawn to just the time in Dublin. I think Dublin is maybe a lot easier to be less homesick in than Galway. I think because Galway is, well, it's a very cultural city center, but it is on the west coast. It's in the west. It's in the more countryside of Ireland. I could see that being a little more isolating than Dublin. And Dublin has such a rich history. It has such a beautiful, like, you can just spend forever in Dublin and you find new adventures just by walking down a street. So I was drawn to the fact that I would be finding new adventures every single day in Dublin while having a great job that I wouldn't have elsewhere, while getting to know a city that I hitherto did not know and didn't really love. So I was like, I will gladly do this, and Galway, if it calls me, will call me.
Yeah. So kind of harping on those little adventures, was there something that you experienced or you kind of traveled to that you weren't really expecting would be anything spectacular, but you ended up loving it? I don't know why this is the first one that pops up, but it is. So my birthday was during my stay in Dublin, and I didn't want to tell anyone, but I was with my roommate and we were walking around, and I found out there was a rose garden on campus, and I was like, let's go to the rose garden. And it was honestly the most bare bones rose garden you could ever imagine. The trees were barely like hip level, like the roses were all at your feet, and there was no maze, but it was pretty enough. So we sat down on these rocks that were just, they looked old enough to sit down on and really have good conversation. And we just sat and we talked about how we were doing. We'd been there for a week, which felt like a long time, at least in that moment. So I think what I found was that the adventures that you just find on a map and that you don't plan out, those are the ones that tend to have the most fruitful, life-giving gems of wisdom and knowledge. And I wouldn't have had that time with my roommate if I wasn't just looking for it. If I wasn't just looking, if it didn't just pop up in front of me. If I didn't have my maps open and saw, oh, there's a rose garden and I'm curious what that looks like. Because I could plan to go to the Museum of Literature and I could say, oh my gosh, how awesome it is to see the first edition copy of Ulysses by James Joyce. I could plan to go to the art gallery and see this beautiful painting by Jack B. Yeats. But I didn't plan on going to the rose garden, and I didn't plan on having that wonderful conversation. And from there, that planning resulted in a wonderful relationship that I still continue to this day. Oh, it's awesome. So now moving from your little side quests to the broader scope of everything that you did in Ireland, it's a hard question, but if you could pinpoint a favorite memory from all of Ireland, what would that be?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll just say we went to Belfast, Wexford, and Westport together as a community. So we had all sorts of different experiences and different opportunities to have different memories. And everyone does have different memories. Some people loved Belfast. I wasn't one of them. That's okay. I think Wexford was our first time together as a group, so there were so many awkward moments, but there were still great moments to take from it. As I said earlier, Westport was my favorite place to visit. And the one memory I really have was just being with the people I was with at dinner and just having fun with them. Wasn't even like we were having meaningful conversation. We were all just sitting there eating pasta, because who would expect to be eating Italian food in Dublin, especially on the West Coast? And it was good too. I'm from North Jersey, I should know. But those moments of just like unbridled silliness were just delightful. I think it was those memories of those people walking about. We were also all watching Bridgerton at the time, and there was a manor in Westport that we kind of all walked up, and we were just like pretending to be like these Bridgerton ladies, like about to be married off to someone. It was wonderful. We also went sea kayaking. There are so many memories from Westport. I'm just going to give you all of them. We went sea kayaking, and well, we weren't told we were going to be sea kayaking, so we just got right in the water. And I was wearing leggings, so everything was wet. I was just wet everywhere. I didn't bring an extra change of clothes because I wasn't aware that was going to be happening at that point in time. So I think just something I learned overarchingly is just to embrace the moments that you don't plan for. And I'm so glad I did.
Aw, that's awesome. So if you could redo your abroad experience, what would you do differently? If you would do anything differently?
I would go to Galway. Oh gosh, I would go to Galway. When my friends went to Galway, I was in Dalkey, and I wouldn't trade that experience for the world. It was fantastic. I still think about a sandwich I had there. But if I could go again, I would go to Galway, and I would just make it a personal pilgrimage because there's so much culture and such vibrancy there that I would love to chase and explore. I have a cousin who lives, again, more cousins, just outside of Galway, and it's called the Burren. It's in between these little salt mountains. And she's right by the coast. She's right by Clare, and you can see the Galway Bay from her window. So if I could go again, I'd go to Galway town, and I'd stay with my cousin, and I would just sit at the window and stare at Galway Bay.
Aw. Now I have to ask, what was this life-changing sandwich that you're still thinking about from Dalkey?
Okay, so I was going to order on a baguette.
Okay.
But then they ran out of baguette. It was this little restaurant. It was the little cafe. It was called Time Out. Thyme. Time.
Okay.
There wasn't thyme, I don't think, in it. But anyways, it was, you're going to love it, actually. Chicken, pesto, mozzarella, sun-dried tomatoes, and a wrap panini pressed. It was so good.
That sounds really good.
But except the pesto and the mozzarella kind of like creamed together a little bit. It was just so good. I wasn't even that hungry, but I was like, I'm not doing anything, so I'm just going to eat this. And I'm so glad I did. It was so good.
Awesome. Now my final question for you is, if any of our viewers are aspiring to travel to Ireland and they kind of have, the goal to get there one day, what's the advice that you would give for traveling to Ireland?
Do plan, but don't stay in Dublin. Get out. Go visit the countryside. Go visit the cities and towns that populate the west and the north and the south. When I took my parents, I regretted that I didn't take them more west because my mom just wanted to see real Ireland and she was stuck in a city. So if I could recommend, go to Waterford town is really lovely. You can go visit the Waterford Crystal Shop, and that's a really cool experience. And there's also just like cool historical places to go. Go to Galway. Go to County Mayo, go visit Knock, go visit Westport. Just get out of Dublin, because Dublin is wonderful. And I'm so glad I spent 8 weeks there, because I could spend 8 more weeks there. But if you want to know Ireland, you need to get out of Dublin.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming. I loved learning more about Ireland and your experience, and it sounds like it was truly amazing.
It was. Thank you so much, Ava, for this. This is wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you for watching today's episode of The Ways of the World. I'm your host, Ava Petrosky. Stay tuned for next time.